The Valari homeworld was dying. Not from disease or natural disaster, but from war. The Krath Empire had come 3 cycles ago with their massive warships and their hunger for conquest. They wanted Valari Prime for its resources, its location, its people. The Valari had fought back with everything they had. It was not enough. Princess Yuna stood at the tall window of her father's throne room and watched another city burn in the distance. Orange flames painted the night sky. Somewhere out there, her people were dying. She pressed her silver-skinned hand against the cold glass and felt nothing but emptiness. The Valari were not warriors. They were diplomats, artists, scholars. Their civilization had lasted 10,000 years by making friends, not enemies. But the Krath did not want friends. They wanted slaves. Behind her, King Dohan sat on his throne with his head in his hands. He looked older than his years. The war had stolen the light from his eyes. Around him stood his advisors, generals and ministers. They all wore the same expression of defeat. "We have 40 warships left," General Hansu said quietly. "The Krath have 200 on their way. They will arrive within the month. Then we surrender," Minister Jiwan said. Her voice shook. "We negotiate. We give them what they want." "What they want is everything," Yuna said without turning from the window. "Our land, our labor, our lives. Surrender means slavery." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she spoke the truth. King Dohan raised his head slowly. His eyes found his daughter, and Yuna saw something there she had never seen before. Desperation. "There is one option we have not tried," he said. The advisors exchanged confused looks. Yuna turned to face her father. "The humans," the king continued. "The Terran Confederacy." General Hansu made a sound of disgust. "The humans? They are primitives, Your Majesty. They only discovered faster than light travel 2 centuries ago. They have no standing in galactic politics. What could they possibly offer us?" "I have heard stories," the king said slowly. "Rumors from traders and travelers. They say humans are different from other species. They say humans do not know when to stop fighting. They say humans are dangerous." "Rumors and stories," Minister Jiwan said. "We need real help." "We need anything," Yuna said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She stepped away from the window and walked to stand before her father's throne. "We are dying, Father. If there is even a small chance the humans can help us, we must take it." The king nodded slowly. "I have already sent envoys. They returned this morning with an answer." Yuna felt hope bloom in her chest for the first time in months. "They will help us?" "Yes, but they have a condition." Something in her father's voice made Yuna's hope turn cold. "What condition?" King Dowan could not meet her eyes. "A marriage. A political union between our peoples. They want you to marry one of their officers." The room erupted in protest. Ministers shouted about insults and barbarism. Generals demanded alternative solutions. But Yuna stood perfectly still, feeling the weight of her father's words settle onto her shoulders like chains. Marriage to a human. A creature from a primitive world. A stranger she had never met. She closed her eyes and thought of the burning city. She thought of the children in the refugee camps. She thought of her mother, who had died in the first Krath attack. Smiling as she pushed Yuna into an escape pod. "I will do it," Yuna said. The shouting stopped. King Dowan looked at his daughter with tears in his eyes. "Yuna, I cannot ask this of you." "You are not asking. I am choosing." She straightened her spine and lifted her chin. "If my marriage can save our people, then it is a small price to pay." The human arrived 2 weeks later. Yuna had expected a brute. She had expected muscles and scars and the swagger of a warrior. She had prepared herself for rough hands and a rough voice. The man who stepped off the transport ship was none of these things. Taiho was average height, lean rather than muscular. His black hair was neatly combed, and his dark eyes were calm and warm. He wore a simple military uniform without any medals or decorations. When he saw Yuna waiting for him on the landing platform, he bowed deeply in the Valari fashion. "Princess Yuna," he said in perfect Valari language, "thank you for this honor. I know this situation is not what you wished for. I will do my best to be worthy of your sacrifice." Yuna stared at him. This was the human soldier who would save her people? This quiet, polite man who bowed too low and spoke too softly. Behind Taiho, only 50 human soldiers exited the transport. 50. Against the Krath's 50,000. Is this all? Yuna asked, unable to hide her disappointment. Taiho smiled slightly. It was a sad smile, as if he understood exactly what she was thinking. For now, yes. More will come if needed. But we prefer to start small. The wedding happened 3 days later. It was brief and formal. Taiho wore white, the human color of celebration. Yuna wore silver, the Valari color of duty. When the ceremony required them to hold hands, Taiho's grip was gentle. That night, they stood in their shared quarters. A vast distance between them, despite the small room. "I will not force anything upon you," Taiho said quietly. "This marriage is political. I understand that. I will sleep in the other room." Yuna nodded stiffly. "Thank you." She watched him gather a blanket and pillow. At the door, he paused and looked back at her. "I know you think this alliance is hopeless," he said. "I know you look at me and see a man who cannot possibly fight the Krath. Maybe you are right. But I promise you this, princess. I will die before I let your people fall." Then he was gone, leaving Yuna alone with her doubts. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krath fleet was coming. 200 warships, 50,000 soldiers. And all that stood between them and her people was a quiet human who smiled too easily. Yuna pressed her forehead against the glass and whispered to the darkness, "We are doomed." 3 weeks passed, and Yuna began to wonder if she had married a scholar instead of a soldier. Every morning, Taiho woke before sunrise. He would exercise quietly in the courtyard, moving through strange slow movements that looked more like dance than combat training. Then he would eat a small breakfast and disappear into the palace library. Yuna followed him once, curious despite herself. She found him surrounded by books and data tablets, reading everything he could find about Valari history, culture, and language. He took notes in a small book. He asked the librarians questions. He studied maps of the capital city for hours. "What are you doing?" she finally asked him. Taiho looked up and smiled. "Learning. Learning what?" "You should be planning for battle. The Krath will be here in weeks." "I am planning," he said simply. "But first, I need to understand. I cannot protect something I do not know." Yuna did not understand this human at all. In the War Council meetings, Taiho sat quietly while Valari generals argued and shouted. He rarely spoke. When he did offer suggestions, the generals dismissed him with barely hidden scorn. He was too young, too foreign, too human. What could he possibly know about real warfare? Taiho never argued back. He simply nodded and asked more questions. One evening, Yuna found him sitting on a balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Taiho sat with his legs hanging over the edge, looking at the stars that were beginning to appear. She hesitated, then walked over and sat beside him. They had barely spoken since the wedding. She did not know why she approached him now. "Do you miss your home?" she asked. Taiho was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Earth is very different from here." We have blue skies and green trees. Oceans so big, you cannot see the other side. Mountains covered in snow. It sounds beautiful. It is. But home is not really a place. He looked at her, and his eyes were deeper than she had expected. Home is the people you protect. The people you would die for. A soldier without something to protect is just a killer. Ina did not know what to say. Her people fought because they had no choice. They fought to survive. But this human spoke of protection like it was something sacred, something chosen. You're 50 soldiers, she said slowly. They follow you. I can see it in their eyes. Why? Taiho smiled slightly. Because they know I would never ask them to do something I would not do myself. Because they know I will always be the first into danger and the last to retreat. Because they trust me with their lives, and I carry that trust like it is the most precious thing in the universe. That sounds heavy. It is. It is. But that is what leadership means. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars multiply across the darkening sky. Yuna found that the silence was not uncomfortable. For the first time since her mother died, she felt almost peaceful. Teach me about the Valari, Taiho said suddenly. Yuna turned to look at him. What do you want to know? Everything. Your customs. Your beliefs. Your stories. What makes your people laugh? What makes them cry? What do they love? What do they fear? Why? Taiho met her eyes steadily. Because when I fight for your people, I want to know exactly what I'm fighting for. Not just their survival. Their spirit. Their soul. Something shifted in Yuna's heart then, though she did not yet have a name for it. She began to speak. She told him about Valari holidays and Valari songs. She told him about the way her mother used to braid her hair. She told him about the first time she saw a starship, and how she had thought it was a giant silver bird. Taiho listened to everything. He asked questions. He laughed at her jokes. He looked sad when she spoke of her mother. By the time the moons rose high in the sky, Yuna realized she had talked for hours. She also realized something else. She had stopped thinking of Taiho as the human. She had begun thinking of him as her husband. The next morning, alarms shattered the peace. The Krath fleet had arrived early. 200 warships hung in orbit like dark clouds, blocking out the sun. The invasion force began landing within hours. 50,000 soldiers descended upon Valari Prime like a plague of metal and fire. The war council erupted in chaos. Generals screamed orders. Ministers wept. King Do-wan sat on his throne, with the look of a man watching his own funeral. In the middle of all this, Taiho stood. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the quiet human who had said so little for 3 weeks. Give me command of the ground defense, Taiho said. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. Just the ground. Let them land. Let them think they have won. General Hansu laughed harshly. You want us to let them land? Are you insane? No, I am human. What difference does that make? Taiho smiled, and for the first time, Yuna saw something behind his kind eyes. Something old. Something dangerous. Something that had been waiting. My people have a saying, Taiho said quietly. Never corner something meaner than you. The Krath think they have us trapped. They think this will be easy. Let them think that. Let them land their soldiers. Let them walk into our city. And then, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. King Do-wan looked at his daughter. Yuna thought about the past 3 weeks. She thought about the man who studied books and asked questions and spoke of protection like prayer. She thought about his soldiers, who looked at him like he was something more than human. Do it, she said. The generals protested. The ministers cried out. But King Do-wan raised his hand for silence. My daughter has spoken, he said. Human, You have your command. Show us what your species can do." Taiho bowed deeply. Then he turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at Yuna. "Stay safe, princess. This is about to get ugly." Then he was gone, and the real war began. The Krath landed their soldiers with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. They had conquered 40 worlds in 2 decades. They had crushed species far more advanced than the Velari. This campaign would be another easy victory. Another world added to their empire. Commander Drax stood on the landing platform and surveyed the capital city before him. The Velari had retreated behind their walls like frightened animals. He could see their pathetic defenses from here. A few energy shields. Some anti-aircraft guns. Nothing that could stop 50,000 Krath warriors. "Begin the advance," he ordered. "Take the city by nightfall." His soldiers moved forward in perfect formation. 10,000 in the first wave. Heavy armor. Energy weapons. They marched through the empty streets, kicking down doors, searching buildings. They found nothing. The Velari had fled. Drax smiled. This would be even easier than expected. Then the first explosion happened. A building on the left side of the street erupted in fire and metal. 200 Krath soldiers disappeared in an instant. Before the survivors could react, another explosion tore through their ranks from the right. Drax screamed orders into his communicator. His soldiers tried to regroup, but the explosions kept coming. From above, from below, from everywhere. The humans had spent 3 weeks preparing. Taiho had walked every street in the capital. He had studied every building, every alley, every drainage tunnel. He had asked the Velari engineers where the weak points were. He had asked the construction workers where to place charges. He had asked the civilians where they used to hide when playing games as children. Now all that knowledge became death. Yuna watched from the palace command center as the tactical display lit up with explosions. Red dots representing Krath soldiers blinked out by the hundreds. She could not believe what she was seeing. How is this possible? General Hansu whispered. They only have 50 soldiers. They have more than that now, King Dowan said quietly. He was right. Over the past 3 weeks, while the generals mocked him and the ministers ignored him, Taiho had been busy. He had recruited 500 Velari volunteers, young men and women who refused to flee. He had trained them day and night in human tactics. Not the elegant warfare the Velari knew. Something dirtier, something meaner. The humans called it guerrilla warfare. Velari snipers appeared on rooftops, firing into Krath formations before vanishing into hidden passages. Small teams struck supply lines and retreated before reinforcements could arrive. Every street became a trap. Every building became a weapon. But the real shock came when Yuna saw Taiho himself. She found him on a security camera feed, leading a squad through the market district. The quiet man who had bowed at their wedding was gone. In his place was something she did not recognize. A Krath soldier charged at Taiho, twice his size, covered in armor. Taiho did not run. He did not hesitate. He moved like water flowing around stone. 2 quick strikes to joints the armor did not cover. The Krath fell. Another soldier. Another fall. 3 more came at him together. Taiho spun through them like a dancer in a storm. He found every weakness, every gap, every soft spot. His movements were beautiful and terrible at the same time. A Krath blade cut his arm. Blood sprayed across the broken street. Taiho did not stop. He grabbed the blade with his wounded hand, pulled the soldier close, and ended him with a knife to the throat. What is he? Yuna breathed. He is human, her father said. There was something new in his voice. Something like awe. This is what they truly are. This is what they hid behind their smiles and their manners. The other species call him primitive, because they are young. But age and wisdom are different things. Humans learn violence before they learned anything else. It is written in their very blood. The battle raged for 6 days. The Krath sent wave after wave of soldiers into the city. Each wave broke against human stubbornness. The streets filled with Krath dead. The survivors began to whisper about ghosts and demons. Commander Drax could not understand what was happening. He had fought 100 battles. He had never seen anything like this. These humans did not fight like any species he knew. They did not value their own survival. They threw themselves into impossible situations and somehow survived. When they were wounded, they kept fighting. When they were surrounded, they attacked harder. On the 4th day, Drax watched a single human soldier hold a bridge against 30 Krath warriors. The human was shot 7 times. He killed 12 Krath before finally falling, and his last act was to trigger explosives that destroyed the bridge. What are these creatures? Drax muttered. One of his officers, a veteran of 20 campaigns, answered quietly. I have heard stories, Commander. The humans call themselves the children of Earth. They say their world tried to kill them from the moment they were born. Ice ages, plagues, predators, disasters. But they refused to die. They conquered their own planet through sheer stubborn will. They did not evolve to survive. They evolved to fight. Drax stared at the burning city. For the first time in his military career, he felt something cold in his stomach. Fear. On the 5th day, Yuna could not stay in the palace any longer. She went to the medical tents near the front lines. She needed to do something. She needed to help. She found Taiho there. His left arm was wrapped in bloody bandages, hanging useless at his side. His face was cut and bruised. But he was not resting. He was kneeling beside a wounded Velari soldier, using his one good hand to apply a bandage. You should be sleeping, Yuna said. Taiho did not look up. Later. She needs this more than I need rest. Yuna knelt beside him and watched him work. His hands were gentle, so different from the killing machine she had seen on the security footage. How can you be both? She asked quietly. Taiho finally met her eyes. He understood her question without her explaining. Every human learns this, he said. We are capable of terrible violence. But violence is a tool, not a purpose. We fight so that others do not have to. We kill so that others can live. The moment we forget that, we become monsters. He finished the bandage and stood slowly, swaying with exhaustion. The Krath will launch their final assault tomorrow, he said. They are desperate now. Desperate enemies are dangerous enemies. Will we win? Taiho smiled. It was the same kind smile she remembered from their first meeting. But now she saw what lived behind it. The fire. The iron. The absolute refusal to surrender. We will win, he said, or we will die trying. There is no third option. That is the human way. He walked back toward the battle lines, and Yuna watched him go with new eyes. She had married a weapon to save her people. But somewhere along the way, she had begun to see the man holding the weapon, and she was starting to realize they might be one and the same. The 6th day began with silence. Yuna woke before dawn and felt the wrongness immediately. For 5 days, the sounds of battle had been constant. Explosions, screams, the crack of energy weapons. Now, there was nothing. She dressed quickly and ran to the command center. Her father was already there, along with the generals and ministers. They were all staring at the tactical display with confusion on their faces. They have stopped attacking, General Hansu said. The Krath have pulled back to their landing zones. Why? Minister Jiwan asked. They still have 20,000 soldiers. They could still overwhelm us. Nobody had an answer. Yuna looked at the display and did quick math in her head. 20,000 remaining. That meant 30,000 Krath soldiers had died in 6 days. 30,000 against 50 humans and 500 barely trained volunteers. It seemed impossible. It was impossible. And yet the evidence was right there on the screen. A communication signal came through. King Do-wan accepted it, and the image of Commander Drax appeared on the main display. The Krath commander looked nothing like the confident conqueror who had landed 6 days ago. His face was hollow. His eyes were haunted. "I wish to negotiate," Drax said. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. The Krath did not negotiate. Everyone knew this. The Krath conquered or they destroyed. There was no middle ground. King Do-wan raised his hand for silence. "What terms do you offer?" "Full withdrawal. We will leave Valari Prime and never return. In exchange, you will let our remaining soldiers leave alive." "You came here with 50,000 warriors," the king said slowly. "You have lost 30,000 in less than a week. And now you beg for mercy?" Drax's jaw tightened. "I am not begging. I am being practical. Whatever we thought we knew about humans was wrong. Whatever we thought we knew about warfare was wrong. I have fought for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like what happened in your streets." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "My soldiers are afraid. They call the humans demons, ghosts, unkillable things that smile while they murder. I have lost control of their morale. If we continue this battle, we will lose more than soldiers. We will lose our minds." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. The Krath were warriors. They lived for combat. They feared nothing, and they were terrified of humans. "We accept your terms," King Do-wan said. "Leave our world. Never return." Drax nodded stiffly. His image flickered, and before the connection cut, he spoke one last time. "Tell the human called Taiho something for me. Tell him I want to know what he is. Tell him I need to understand what he is." The king asked. "I watched him through battle footage. I saw him take wounds that would kill any Krath 3 times over. I saw him keep fighting when he should have been dead. I saw him smile while his arm hung useless and his blood pooled on the ground." Drax's voice cracked slightly. "What is he? What made him? How do you create something that refuses to die?" The connection ended. The room was silent. Yuna did not wait for permission. She ran from the command center, through the palace halls, out into the broken streets. She had to find him. She had to see for herself that he was alive. She found Taiho sitting against a ruined wall, surrounded by his surviving soldiers. Only 31 of the original 50 remained. They were bloody, exhausted, barely conscious. But they were smiling. They were laughing with each other. One of them was singing a strange song in the human language. Taiho looked up as Yuna approached. His face was pale from blood loss. His left arm was bound tightly to his chest. Cuts and burns covered every visible inch of skin, but he smiled when he saw her. "Princess," he said. "Good news?" "They are leaving," Yuna said. She knelt beside him, not caring that the ground was wet with blood and ash. "The Krath are surrendering. They are afraid of you." Taiho nodded slowly. "Good. Then it worked." "What worked?" "Fear." He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wall. Humans learned something long ago. You do not have to win every battle. You just have to make victory cost more than defeat. We made them pay so dearly for every street, every building, every inch of ground, that continuing became unthinkable. The Krath commander asked what you are, Yuna said quietly. He wanted to know how you keep fighting when you should be dead. Taiho laughed softly. It turned into a cough. What did you tell him? Nothing. I do not know the answer myself. Taiho opened his eyes and looked at her. For a moment, the exhaustion faded, and she saw something ancient behind his gaze. Something forged in billions of years of struggle. "On Earth," he said slowly, "we have a history of survival that makes other species uncomfortable. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Plagues that killed half our population. Predators that hunted us when we were still small and weak. We should have died 100 times. 1,000 times. But we did not." He reached out with his good hand and touched her cheek gently. "We developed something other species never needed. An absolute, irrational refusal to give up. It is not bravery. It is not strength. It is something deeper. Something broken, maybe. When everything tells us to stop, when logic says surrender, when our bodies fail and our minds scream for rest, something in us says no. Just one more step. Just one more breath. Just one more fight." Tears were forming in Yuna's eyes. She did not know why. "Is that not exhausting?" she whispered. "Yes," Taiho admitted. "It is the most exhausting thing in the universe. But it is also why we are still here. Why we reach the stars. Why we will never stop reaching." He smiled again, and this time Yuna saw the cost of that smile. The weight of generations of human suffering. The price paid by countless ancestors who refused to lie down and die. "The Krath wanted to know what I am," Taiho said. "The answer is simple. I am the product of 1,000,000,000 years of things that would not quit. I am the descendant of survivors. I am human." Yuna took his hand in both of hers. "Then I am glad," she said softly, "that humanity is on our side." Around them, the human soldiers finished their song. The sun rose over the broken city, and somewhere in orbit, Krath warships began to withdraw. The impossible had happened. The Valari had won. 1 year later, Yuna stood in the rebuilt garden of the palace and watched her husband plant flowers. It still surprised her sometimes. The hands that had killed so many Krath soldiers now worked gently in the soil, carefully placing seeds and patting down earth. Taiho hummed quietly as he worked, a human song she had come to recognize. He said it was about going home. The garden had been destroyed during the battle. Artillery fire had torn up the ancient trees and burned the flowers that Yuna's mother had planted decades ago. For months after the war ended, Yuna could not bear to look at the scorched ground. Then Taiho had started digging. He had not asked permission. He had not announced his intentions. One morning, Yuna had found him on his knees in the dirt, planting new seeds with quiet determination. When she asked what he was doing, he simply said that gardens needed tending, and someone had to do it. That was when Yuna began to understand something important about humans. The galaxy saw their violence. The Krath had spread stories of the battle for Valari Prime across 100 worlds. Species that had never heard of humans now whispered about the demons who smiled while they killed. The Terran Confederacy was no longer considered primitive. It was considered dangerous. But Yuna saw something different. She saw Taiho visit the homes of fallen soldiers and sit with their families for hours. She saw him learn the names of every Valari who had fought beside him. She saw him teach children games from Earth and listen to elders tell stories about the old days. She saw him cry when he thought no one was watching, mourning the soldiers he could not save. Violence was something humans could do. It was not what they were. The rebuilding took months. The Krath had destroyed much of the capital before their retreat. Buildings had to be reconstructed. Infrastructure had to be repaired. Wounds had to heal, both physical and emotional. Taiho worked harder than anyone. He carried stones. He welded metal. He dug foundations. When Valari workers told him he did not need to labor alongside them, he simply smiled and kept working. "A leader who does not share his people's burdens is not a leader," he said. "He is a parasite." The Valari began to look at him differently. He was no longer the strange human who had appeared from nowhere. He was Taiho, the man who had saved them. Taiho, who played with their children. Taiho, who asked about their problems and tried to help solve them. Yuna's feelings changed too. Though she was slow to admit it, she found herself seeking him out. At first, she told herself it was political. She was a princess, and he was technically her husband. They needed to maintain appearances. But the excuses became harder to believe when she started looking forward to their conversations. Taiho never pushed. He never demanded anything from her. He was patient, kind, respectful. Sometimes she caught him looking at her with something soft in his eyes. But he always looked away before she could question it. One evening, exactly 1 year after the battle, Yuna found herself on the same balcony where they had first truly talked. The sun was setting. The sky burned with color. Below, the city glowed with new lights, signs of life returning. Taiho found her there. "The garden is finished," he said, standing beside her. "Your mother's flowers will bloom again next spring." Yuna felt tears prick her eyes. She had mentioned her mother's garden only once, in passing, during those long talks before the war. He had remembered. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars appear. "I understand now," Yuna said finally. "Why the galaxy fears humans. Oh? It is not your violence. It is not your weapons. It is not even your refusal to die." She turned to face him. "It is that you choose to be kind. You could conquer the galaxy if you wanted. You could burn everything to ash. But instead, you plant flowers. You teach children games. You sit with grieving families and share their pain." Taiho was quiet, listening. "The violence is terrifying," Yuna continued, "but it is not who you are. It is what you are capable of when someone threatens what you love. And that is so much more frightening, because it means every kindness, every gentle moment, every smile. They are all choices. You choose peace when you could choose war. You choose love when you could choose hate." She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough from garden work. "I married you to save my people," she said softly. "I expected a weapon, but you are so much more than that." Taiho's breath caught. For a long moment, he did not speak. "When I came here," he finally said, "I expected a political arrangement, a duty to fulfill. I did not expect to care. I did not expect to find something worth more than my own life." He squeezed her hand gently. "Your people are beautiful, Yuna. Your culture, your kindness, your art. But you are extraordinary. You faced the end of your world with courage. You trusted a stranger when you had every reason to refuse. You sat with a blood-covered soldier in a medical tent and asked him how he could be both gentle and violent. He met her eyes. "I would burn the entire galaxy to keep you safe. I would tear down stars and shatter moons. But I would rather spend my life planting flowers beside you, watching things grow instead of destroying them." Yuna laughed softly through her tears. "That sounds like a human answer. It is the only answer I have." She stepped closer to him. This time, she did not step back. "Then give me another human answer," she said. "After everything that has happened, after the war and the blood and the death, do you think we could learn to love each other? Not for politics, not for alliance, for ourselves?" Taiho smiled. It was the same gentle smile she had seen on their wedding day, but now she understood what it hid. Now she saw the depths behind it. "We already are learning," he said. "We have been learning since the first night you told me about your mother. Love is not a destination, Yuna. It is a journey. And I would like to walk that journey with you, if you will let me." She answered him with a kiss. Above them, the stars watched in silence. Below, the city of survivors celebrated another day of peace. And in a garden rebuilt from ashes, flowers waited for spring. The war was over. The impossible had been won. But for Princess Yuna of the Valari and the human named Taiho, the real story was just beginning. This was the nature of humans. After all, they did not just survive, they loved. And that, in the end, was the most remarkable power of all.